Good evening all, and welcome. Ever been followed home? Ever had someone stare at you from outside your window and hide in your bushes? These, my friends, are creepers, as you are about to find out. We also have the pleasure of being joined by fellow narrator Gothic Rose. If you enjoy her work, feel free to check out her channel at the end of the video, and the link is also in the description. But for now, it's time to get comfortable, close those curtains, and let the darkness take control. I live in a tough community with a high crime rate, so I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I used to take the train into the city for work, and on a regular day I would park my car in the garage at the train station, because this option was much quicker and saved me the wear and tear on my already struggling car. On this day, my car was in the shop getting worked on, so I had my girlfriend drop me off at the train station and asked my father to pick me up in the evening. Now, my father is notorious for being late, and despite my telling him I would be there 30 minutes before my train arrived, when I got onto the platform, he was nowhere to be seen. I called him asking him how long he would be there, and he gave me the stereotypical grunt and responded, "Soon." I took a seat on a bench, prepared to wait, when I was approached by a man in a business suit. This is not an uncommon sight because many businessmen and women rode the train here every day. He walked up to me and asked if he could sit for a moment. He had his phone in his hand and kept looking at it, putting it to his ear and periodically checking if he could hear anything on the line. As he sits, he looks at me and says, "I hate these phones. Never work when you need them to." I look back and give him a nod. "Yeah, I know." He tells me he just interviewed at his dream job in the city, and the employer told him he would contact him with an answer around this time. He then asked me if I could do him a favor and give his phone a call to make sure he had service, and be sure his phone was working properly. Really not thinking anything of it, I agreed and handed him my phone. I'm not afraid of him running away with it because while he is a grown man, I'm not little and I'm confident I would beaten the crap out of this guy. He dials away and without hesitation his phone rings, and a thought pops into my head. That sneaky son of a gun just wanted my number. I should explain why I immediately thought of this. Long story short, I apparently have a certain look that some gay men find attractive. I have been approached on multiple occasions, and I have been asked if by looking at me, they think I am gay. Most say no, but they feel comfortable trying. A compliment at its core, but it happens more times than I care to count. As this guy is in the suit and is pretending to be relieved his phone is working, I'm not angry at him. I thought it was just clever, and shrugged it off as, you got me. He gives me back my phone, and I opened it, pretending to look at something important, hoping he would go away. But he didn't. He sat there, watching me. I was getting uncomfortable, and when I am put in a situation, my general response is impulsive, and I want to fight. I'm not homophobic or anything, but he was 3 inches away from me and just looking at me. I could feel my blood pumping, and I keep repeating to myself, keep it up and you'll see what happens. I have a much bigger bark than bite, but I can confidently say that if you get on my wrong side, I will swing. I look at him and ask if there's anything else he needed, and the creep didn't flinch and just sat there looking at me with a grin on his face. I think he knew I was onto him, and he thought it was funny. But it wasn't. To my amazement, before I told this guy to piss off, my father pulls up and I quickly get to my feet, walk towards the car, and don't acknowledge him nor look back. My father makes a joke when I get to the car, asking if that was my boyfriend because of the way he was looking at me. I laugh and say no. Not a chance I was going to tell my father what the creep was up to. I did this for the creep's sake. My father is a very hard man. Prison, been shot, has found God, and is a wonderful man now, but not the man you want to piss off, especially when it comes to his kids. Later that night, I was writing a paper for college when my phone rings. I didn't recognize the number, but it only takes me a few seconds to clock that it's the guy. "Hi, I have a missed call by this number." "I don't know, you must have the wrong number, man." "Are you sure? I feel like I recognize your voice. I think we know each other." "Nope, I don't know you and I don't recognize your voice. You have the wrong number." "I'm telling you, I think I know." "Where do you live? Maybe we're neighbors." "Okay, guy, I know who this is, and I don't want to be mean, but I know what you're doing and I'm not interested. Don't call again." Satisfied I did not lose my cool, I went back to my paper and initially forgot all about the call. About 10 minutes later, I get a text message saying something about how he will take care of me. Still on my "I'm not gonna lose it" mode, I laugh and block the number. Fast forward at least a few months, and I'm with a friend getting a coffee and my phone goes off. It says I has a voicemail and I still don't know how I got it without my phone ringing. When I listen, the voicemail recorded is something like, "Hello Chris, this is Dr. Smith. I want to confirm our appointment tomorrow and let you know we have changed offices. My secretary is on vacation, so if there is no response, just be aware your appointment has been moved to tomorrow, and our new office is located at la 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 la." I listened to the voicemail and thought, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow? However professional the voicemail sounded, it didn't feel right. For one, I had no clue who Dr. Smith was, and I didn't remember making any appointments. I was really trying to figure it out. I was even going as far as to thinking my insurance requires a yearly physical or something. I listened to the voicemail a few times, and on the third or fourth time it hit me. I don't know how, but I recognized the voice. The man from the train. I told my friend and he suggested we drive by the address he listed. When we arrived, we were at these old mill buildings. The area I live in is historic for its mills during the Industrial Revolution, and recently there's been a lot of construction renovating them into offices and apartments, so nothing stood out yet. Parked outside, I needed to see the 5th floor like the voicemail says. We didn't need to go all the way up to the 5th floor to see the building was completely empty. I was surprised we could walk in. No bells rang when looking at the rustic exterior of the building, because even the finished mills had preserved that old look on the outside. However, inside this place is deserted and falling apart. You can tell homeless people stay here because there are a few dirty mattresses and other signs of people having been there. My friends and I looked at each other and both let out a small wail and ran out of there, half scared, half laughing. However, when we got back to the car, I wasn't laughing anymore. I was pissed, and to this day wish I had acted more responsibly. I should have called the police and tried to set him up, but instead I called him back, and when he answered, I immediately told him to drop the act. I told him I wasn't going to call the cops, but when or if I ever saw him again, I would end him. I was screaming into the phone, telling him all the horrible ways and all the things I would do to him, and I never heard from him again. But I can honestly admit, after my anger went away, I considered the full scope of what he had planned, and it shook me up for a few days. What on earth did he want to do? What could he have done to me?
It was last year in summer. I had just moved into my new apartment in a bigger city, and me and some of my friends planned on having a barbecue party at a lake nearby. I was very happy that day, I remember, and even went to H&M beforehand to get myself a new cute dress to wear that evening. We hadn't bought some things yet, like paper plates and some forks and knives, so my friend and me wanted to go buy them. Nothing special. I got into my car and drove to the train station where I waited for my friend to arrive. Because it was so hot that day, I parked my car under a bridge in a parking lot and left my window a little rolled down and thought nothing of it. When suddenly, some dude approached my car. He came walking relatively fast, which looked weird, but again, nothing that special. He then proceeded to politely ask me how to get to a special shop, which seemed a little weird to me because I never heard of that shop before, and also I just moved there. I told him, sorry, I don't know, but I'm gonna Google for you. Just give me a sec. And he thanked me and introduced himself. He said, "Hi, I'm Ron, and who are you?" And reached for my hand. He overall seemed like a nice dude. A little strange, but nice. I was a little skeptical, but also introduced myself. I found the shop, but it was far from where we were standing, and it was closing soon. He wouldn't get there in time. I said, "So the shop is far away, and it's closing in a few minutes, so unfortunately, I guess you won't make it there in time." He kind of just nodded and didn't say anything. He paused a little and began talking of why he wanted to go there. He told me that he had accidentally got his girlfriend pregnant. I didn't want to talk to him any longer because something felt wrong. So I just said something like, "Oh well," and stared into nothing. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see that he began touching his crotch with his left hand whilst talking to me. His voice started to sound very weird, like his nose was clogged. I glanced at him for just a second, and he leaned on my window. I did not say anything at all for a moment, and just thought of how my friend was supposed to already be here, but she wasn't. He looked around the inside of my car. He must have seen the paper bag from H&M on the back seat, 'cause he continued asking if I had bought something nice to wear already. It was only then when I realized that this guy probably didn't have a girlfriend and only needed an excuse to talk to younger girls. He was a skinny older dude, probably in his 50s, with a receding hairline and sweat stains on his gray shirt. His pants were orange and dirty, and he was wearing flip-flops. It was also this moment I realized I shouldn't trust people only because they seemed nice. I told him that yes, I bought something for myself. I kept my answers very short and told him that I had to go now. But he didn't seem to care and interrupted me, and he kept touching himself. He asked me where I was from, and I looked at him and lied. I couldn't tell this weird man who used me as some sort of messed up fantasy where I was really from, because at this point, I was getting really scared. He nodded again and started talking about his imaginary girlfriend again and how they really didn't want a baby yet. Then he started drooling. He asked me if I wanted babies soon, and I obviously said no, because even if I wanted to, I wouldn't tell this weirdo. His drooling was getting kind of out of hand, and that's when I just started the motor and told him that I really had to go now, and I drove off. All I heard him shout after me was, "I wish you'd have my babies." And he hissed at me and licked his lips. I drove far into the opposite direction that he went and parked my car in a corner. I immediately called my friend to tell her why she had to walk a little bit, because I really didn't want to come back there. She, of course, understood. Fortunately, I moved 2 months later again into another city because of other reasons, and I never saw him again. I don't even want to know what would have happened if I had rolled down my window a little more or something. I hope nobody ever meets this guy.
This happened about a year ago. Since then, I've never had a haircut. My mum and I were in a mall salon for a haircut. She stated my name to the receptionist, and since the salon was not that full by the time, I immediately got called. My hair was shampooed by a skinny guy who was a little too chit-chatty. He was the junior hairstylist. While he was washing my hair, my phone beeped several times, since I had messages from my friends. He started asking me questions. Do you have a lot of friends? Is that your boyfriend texting you? I thought it was weird. However, it wasn't over yet. He started asking me where I lived, where I went to school. Did I have someone waiting for me outside? Of course, I didn't give him accurate information. He was starting to give me the creeps. Now, a junior hairstylist usually assists a senior hairstylist, right? I found relief when the junior came because the skinny guy stopped asking me weird questions. But when the senior left for a while, he slipped a pen and paper under the table and told me to write my name on Facebook so we could be friends and talk any time. Bro. Since I remembered the receptionist listing down my first name, I was afraid he would ask that person. I didn't pick up the pen at first, and he kept on eyeing me in the mirror. Luckily, the senior came back and continued to cut my hair. When the senior was done with my hair, the junior was assigned to blow dry. I was forced to write my name on the paper, and since I was aware of what he's doing, I wrote my incomplete name and changed the spelling, so there was no way he could find me. Nonetheless, my hands were shaking, but I doubt he noticed it. Just when I thought he was done with his scheme, he started to touch my shoulder with his hard, erect member while blow-drying my hair. I wanted to scream and tell him to get the hell off me, but I really couldn't. I was frozen in fear. Take note, this was a well-known salon with a good reputation. I'm certain that every employee was trained well. I wonder how he got there and what he did to deserve his place. I still regret the fact that I did nothing to make him stop. I know I should have done something. I know I was a terrible person, but since then I swore to myself I'd do the right thing if something like that ever happens again. I wish I would have got his ass fired.
We recently moved to Salem, Massachusetts, a couple of weeks ago, and had a place set up with roommates. But it fell through at the last minute, and we were left stranded with nowhere to go for the night. We walked to a nearby town to try and find a place to sleep for the night until we were able to figure things out. Boyfriend is working, and I'm still looking for a job, and have several interviews next week. Anyways, to the story. So after having nowhere to go and being desperate, it's also around 3 a.m. So my boyfriend posts a Craigslist ad reaching out for help. I know Craigslist is risky, and this story is why. Someone responded to the ad and offered us a place, and we found our way to the address. When we got there, an old, disheveled, and very dirty-looking man was at his garage on a big hill littered with old camper trailers and abandoned vehicles. It looked like a literal junkyard. We introduce ourselves, and he tells us he's got a place in this shack in an attic. My boyfriend was sketched out, and so was I. But we were so exhausted from walking all night that we really needed sleep. So we took it. The attic was filthy and cold, 40 degrees or less, and there was a dirty mattress and some blankets. He said he took in a junkie couple, but they left without notice months ago. Really sketchy, but I needed to sleep. He let us sleep for the day, and when we woke up, we decided to go to a nearby McDonald's to charge our phones and see if any friends answered if we could stay with them temporarily. The guy, Richard, starts texting my phone and leaving me voicemails, saying how we don't trust him and why did we leave. So I sent a text back saying that we were charging our phones and we'd be back to talk to him. After that, he sent me a text saying in all caps, "I guess you don't trust me. Bye." I'm like, what's going on? So I call him and explain the situation. He starts saying how we need to come back so he can talk to us about the place. We come back and he is very visibly drunk. He starts rambling on about how he's not a child molester and how we're stupid for going to McDonald's to charge our phones, and we're stupid for buying food at McDonald's because he has food for us. I wanted to leave then, but I don't know anyone here. My boyfriend does, but his friends all live with their parents and everyone said no to us staying with them. So, boyfriend goes to the store to get smokes, and I stay behind to help creepy Richard with some stuff in the yard. He starts almost interrogating me, asking would I die for boyfriend? Do I trust him? How much do I love him? I tell him yes, I trust him, and I love him. He tells me I'm stupid, and that he's just gonna leave me, and it won't work out. We've been together 3 years and are very close. He would never leave me because we're very loyal to each other. Richard then stands up and starts kind of darting around back and forth around me like he's staring at me and around me, kind of like he's trying to read me. I asked him what he's doing because it made me uncomfortable, and he shook his head as if coming out of a trance and apologized. Then he said I was stupid for trusting my boyfriend. He then says again how he's not a child molester. No one even said anything remotely relevant to this. So it was suspicious that he kept trying to stress to us he wasn't a molester. Then he tells me he's a mean person and has been accused of killing and abusing people. But that he's not an abuser, but he's killed someone. I start panicking and boyfriend returns. We are alone in the attic and I tell him what happened with Richard, and he's panicked and we're not sure what to do because no one can take us in. And we didn't have enough money for a motel until a few days later when he got paid. So we try to stick it out a bit and decide if Richard tries something, we can protect ourselves. Next day, boyfriend goes to work and I'm there alone and scared. I have my phone and am able to talk to boyfriend while he's at work. Richard keeps finding excuses to come up to the attic and talk to me. He asks if I want to take a shower at some random guy's house. I don't know. I said no and made up an excuse about not wanting to get sick with wet hair. He asks again and again, trying to convince me. And I said no, I'm not leaving without my boyfriend. He finally leaves me alone about it, but still keeps finding excuses to come talk to me. My boyfriend finally comes back after work, and I'm really panicked and crying and begging to leave. We figure something out and are able to get to his mom's. That night, Richard comes back up to the attic saying he's gonna talk to boyfriend, and I go with him into his camper trailer with boyfriend. There's a computer monitor hooked up to a TV with a naked woman. There's stacks of adult pornography DVDs all over. The place reeks of a horrid smell we can't describe. I wanted to leave right then. Finally, we attempt to sleep one more night there, and around 4 a.m. in the shack below us, we hear lots of banging and hammering and all kinds of loud noises. We're both panicked and stay quiet, since he's right below us. We hear him talking to himself in full conversation, as if no one was around. No, he wasn't on his phone. After about an hour, he comes up there and starts asking my boyfriend to help him with some heavy loading of junk into a truck. Boyfriend says no and explains we're leaving, and we have to be somewhere to catch the train at a specific time that morning. Richard gets visibly irritated and tries to keep us there again. finally, we were able to leave. My boyfriend's mom gets us, and I start crying and begging to please not take us back there. She's confused because she doesn't know what's happened, because my boyfriend was scared to tell her. Finally, we tell her the whole story, and she's concerned and empathetic with us. She says she's going to make sure we don't go back. This is now 1 day later. I'm writing this, and we've found a friend who's letting us crash for a few weeks until we save up some paychecks. I was looking on Craigslist to see about apartment rentals, and I see Richard's ads about needing a female roommate and wants pictures and such. I knew it was him because he said he was moving to Maine soon, and he told us a lot about his plan to move to Maine. There's currently about 8 ads on Craigslist, all from him, looking for a female roommate in Salem. And he's 53 years old, named Richard, and moving to Maine. This scared me even more, because I don't know if he's trying to lure in females or not. If my boyfriend never showed up from work, I know I'd probably be dead now. I got horrible vibes from the man, and honestly thought we'd die there. I have his phone number and wanted to see if I can find his full name to do an internet arrest search. I was unable to get results without paying, and I can't afford that. I'm debating placing an anonymous call to the cops about his address and what he's saying about he killed someone, and everyone says he's a molester. I never want to see that place again.
In 2019, I moved to a post-Soviet country for work. There's this American diner I always go to on Saturdays for lunch. It's one kind of place in this city, owned by this half-Cuban dude who loves the USA. Not surprisingly, the place attracts a lot of American expats who want to feel at home. It takes me around 25 minutes to get there walking from my apartment, but as it gets extremely cold during the winter months, I always take a taxi that drops me off next to a big mall on the opposite side of the narrow street where the diner is, as the street is inaccessible by vehicle. It's hard to describe it, but the best way to reach the restaurant's entrance is by crossing the fenced garden of an old wooden church. It's an Orthodox church from the 19th century turned into a museum. It is now surrounded by massive office buildings. The garden is small, you can cross it in 3 minutes, and the exit gates face the restaurant. During the winter, snow covers it completely. It was a Saturday morning, January if I recall correctly, and the snow was fresh on the floor. I was walking to the diner when I noticed unusual footprints in the snow, as if someone was walking in circles, back and forth, and for a long period. But there was no one around, and all of the office buildings seemed to be closed. I keep walking. All of a sudden, a man that was hiding behind the church reveals himself. He doesn't look hostile, but there's something extremely odd about him. He's wearing baggy jeans, a dirty hoodie, and a blue cap. It was extremely cold and his outfit was not the best for the weather. He approaches me, smiling. He starts walking on my side. "Hey there," in English, by the way. "Hey, where are you from? Don't be afraid. I like foreigners." The vast majority of the population there look East Asian, so it's easy to tell I'm not local. His English is surprisingly good, but I keep walking away in silence. "You don't need to be afraid, my friend. I'm part of the couch surfing community. I'm a nice guy. Look." He tries to show me something on his phone, maybe his couch surfing profile page. "Would you stay at my place?" he says. "No, dude, thank you." "Oh, would you give me some money to buy us both coffee? You don't have to come with me." At that moment, I was already in front of the restaurant and casually opened the door to enter. He didn't follow. 2 weeks later, same Saturday routine, lunch at the diner and then back home. On my way, I decide to grab a coffee at a nearby place. As I'm walking to the shop, I feel someone following me. It's him, again, wearing the same clothes. We make eye contact and he starts laughing. Then he proceeds to do an extremely creepy thing. He hides behind a bus stop that has glass panels on the side and keeps staring at me. I mean, I could still see him. He was being a complete creep on purpose. I enter the coffee and tell the barista, "Hey, there's a guy following me." The girl looks at me worried and says something to the security guard, as it's common to see guards in all shops there. The guy enters the shop. The moment the door closes behind him, the barista looks at the guard, who immediately removes him from the place. They were so fast it almost seemed like they knew him. Thankfully, I never saw the creeper again.
As a backstory, I'm from Malaysia, and this story happened in one of the international airports there. I came from East Malaysia, and I was a student at one of the local universities in Peninsular. You can't travel to Peninsular Malaysia by land because they are separated by the South China Sea. So of course the fastest way to get to the Peninsular is by flight. And for some reason, I really like taking the last flight of the night to get to my destination. I usually traveled alone, and I mostly keep to myself as I'm an introvert and don't really like talking to strangers. Before that night, I haven't really encountered any problems with weird people, as the airport tended to be busy and I always stayed in an area filled with other people minding their own business and in flight. I would just read or listen to some music. I also tended to just ignore the person sitting next to me. One night, my flight was unfortunately delayed, and we were supposed to reach our destination close to midnight, but with the delay, we would reach the airport close to 2 a.m. I remember being frustrated because I know it would be hard to get an Uber that late. I sighed, and then just decided that I would spend the night at the airport and grab an Uber the next morning to my university. No big deal, I thought. People do this all the time, I thought, so I just relaxed into my seat. I forgot to mention that during the flight, I was supposed to sit in the middle, but when everyone was seated and I noticed that the aisle seat was empty, I moved there. This was when I noticed the guy sitting on the window seat and acting strange. He kept looking at me and was trying to get my attention, but I ignored him with all my might because I was just tired and don't want to have a conversation with a stranger. I just closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I remember it was really cold inside and was thinking about just turning off the AC on top of my seat, but didn't really want to move because then the guy would know I'm awake and I will be forced to engage in a conversation with him. It was a 2.5-hour flight after all, and I don't want to have a conversation during the flight. Then, a whole lot colder than before, and I opened my eyes just a little to figure out what was going on. Then I saw the guy actually adjusting both the AC from the top of his seat and also the AC from the middle seat to face me. I got very annoyed, but I'm not actually someone who likes to confront people for anything. So I just sucked it up and closed my eyes, even though I was now shivering, and just sort of hugged myself and continued to ignore this guy. I honestly don't know what the guy was thinking doing that to me. I thought he was done doing whatever he was doing and wouldn't bother me anymore after that. Right? After all, I didn't respond to whatever the heck he was doing, even though I'm suffering in silence now from the cold. However, when the air hostess started to distribute the prepaid meals to the passengers, and he noticed that I didn't have a meal when he got his, he suddenly tapped my shoulder, and I just tensed up and looked at him in alarm because I really don't like being touched by people due to some childhood trauma, but this guy doesn't seem to have noticed my reaction to him and just smiled at me. "Hey, I noticed that you don't have a meal. Aren't you hungry? You know what? You can have my meal, he said, and I was just looking at him saying, no, it's okay, and smiled uncomfortably. But he insisted and even got me to lower my table and forcing me to accept his meal. Then he ordered another meal for himself and started telling me that he can't eat alone after seeing me. He said he felt sorry for me and that it was in his nature to help people. And then he just watched me eating his meal with a big grin on his face. He didn't even touch his own meal until after I was done. Now, if the meal wasn't prepared by the airline and it wasn't still sealed, I would definitely think he put something in the meal. But then I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe he really was just trying to be helpful. Even though I felt extremely uncomfortable and he was being a little forceful, he even moved to the middle seat to be closer to me. He then asked me what my name was and told me his name was Sam and that he worked somewhere in the Peninsular. I just nodded, and then he asked me where I was from and why I was going to the Peninsular. I gave him a short but honest answer just to be polite. When I told him I was a student at one of the local universities there, he then asked me how I was going to get to my university at this hour. I said stupidly, "Oh, I'm just going to spend the night at the airport. I'm used to it." "What? No, that's too dangerous for a girl as pretty as you," he said before continuing. "You know what? My brother has a place not too far from the airport. Why don't you stay with me?" "Oh, don't worry, my sister-in-law is there. You wouldn't be alone." "Don't worry, I'm a good person," he said, still with that big grin on his face. I immediately became afraid and quickly said no while shaking my head. "There will be a lot of people at the airport. I'm used to it," I said, but he ignored me and began to chatter happily, not caring whether I answered him or not. At one point, he even asked me if I was single and asked for my phone number, and I just gave it to him, but was planning to block his number if he ever tried to contact me or something. He even made a few comments about my looks and how he found me so cute and that I looked so lost, so he just had to say something to me. At this point, I began thinking about my options. For some reason, I didn't think about approaching one of the air hostesses for help, because technically, he hadn't done anything wrong to me, but I felt scared anyhow. I decided that I would get out as fast as I can as soon as we landed and ditch this guy, just to be safe. I don't know, maybe I'm just being an idiot, but I have had several encounters with creepy people before, that it was so bad that my few friends and cousin called me the weirdo magnet due to my naivete. So no, I'm not taking any chances. After all, I was a first-year student, and I had just started university, and I didn't have anyone that I could really call my friends yet. So yeah, I'm on my own. The plane landed, and I tried to get out as fast as I could. But I have carry-on luggage, and it was slowing me down. Sam was standing behind me the whole time, and once we got on the ground, he actually held my hand as if it was the most natural thing to do. I froze. I was really scared, and I honestly didn't know what to do. I absolutely hated it when people touched me. My family never hugged me, and my very few friends knew that I hated being touched unless I tell them it's okay to touch me. And this stranger just held my hand without saying anything. I know I should do something, maybe scream for help, but I just stood there and froze like the idiot that I am. I just followed this stranger. Then we walked past the toilet, and I suddenly got an idea. I told Sam I needed to go to the toilet. At first he said no time because his brother is here and we needed to hurry up, but I insisted on going and that I really have to pee. and I wasn't lying either. So he sighed and said, okay. I got hopeful. Maybe I can escape from this guy. So I started to drag my stupid luggage to the toilet, but this guy stopped me and told me he can look after my luggage for me. I said no thanks, and he just grabbed my luggage from my hand and told me to hurry up. So I walked to the toilet and stayed there for a bit, panicking. I thought about ditching my luggage and trying to escape without it, but then I remembered that my laptop was inside that luggage, and it has all the important documents that I needed for my study. I tried to call somebody on my phone, but it was dead. I started to tear up a bit and decided to just ditch my stupid luggage and run away somehow. But I must have taken too much time in the toilet because then I heard someone enter and call my name. Yes, it was Sam. My heart dropped. I slowly got out from the toilet, fully convinced that this was it for me. I'm doomed. Now, you would think that I would ask for someone's help, or just approach one of the staff for help. I knew I should, but as soon as he touched me, my skin crawled, and I just got really scared again. And since it was already very late, and we were really the last flight to arrive that night, there were very few staff around, and those that were working were engaged in something else or another, or were surrounded by other passengers, probably asking for help about accommodation for the night or something. I just watched them helplessly, hoping someone might notice my distress, but everyone just ignored me. While walking towards his brother's car, he told me to tell his brother that I am his girlfriend and that to just stay quiet and he'll do all the talking. Then I thought maybe I could ask his brother for help and just send me to my university instead of going to wherever this guy is planning to take me. But then I started thinking that what if his brother doesn't believe me? I mean, between family and a stranger, who would you believe, right? Plus, maybe I'm being stupid and Sam was really helping me even though he was forceful and wouldn't let go of me. Maybe he was just overly nice? Seeing no other choice, I sadly got into the car with them. Now, I'm not good with cars, but I remember the car I got into with these strangers. It was a black double-cabin Hilux, but I didn't see a plate number. So we drove for about an hour, and all the time I was scared and this guy wouldn't let my hand go. I noticed the brother keep looking at me through the mirror, and I was even more scared and uncomfortable. Then they brought me to this condo. I was hoping that there really was a sister-in-law, and that all of this was just some huge, stupid misunderstanding. But then his brother told me that his wife is not home, and that she was visiting some family members, and we'll be back tomorrow. I don't know what to think about anymore. So Sam told me I could stay in his room, and tomorrow morning they'd take me to my university. I didn't really want to go to his room, but I don't really want to stay in the living room with the two men that I don't know. He showed me to his room and handed me my luggage, and I just locked the door. So I just sit in his bed looking at the door. My heart was pounding like mad. For a while, nothing happened. Then I heard a knock on the door. I tried to be quiet because maybe whoever it was would leave me alone, thinking I had fallen asleep. "It's Sam. Are you awake?" he said in a quiet voice. "I just need to talk to you for a bit." When I didn't say anything, I heard the doorknob was being turned, but I had locked it so he couldn't get in. Then it was quiet again for a bit until I heard the jingle of a key, and my heart dropped when I realized he had a key and was trying to get inside. I hurriedly told him to wait, and I opened the door, just a bit. Sam was there smiling at me again. "Oh, I thought you were sleeping. Why did you lock the door?" he asked. "What do you want?" "I'm tired. I just really want to rest," I told him and tried to shut the door, but he pushed the door and prevented me from shutting the door properly. Sam, please, just leave me alone for now. I'm really tired, I told him. But he wouldn't budge. Hey, what's wrong? I'm really a good person. You have nothing to fear from me. You can trust me. He said. At this point, I got another idea. Oh yeah? Prove it. Give me your IC, the Malaysian identification card, I said, and to my surprise, he said okay. And he really did give me his IC. See, I'm not lying to you, he told me. So yeah, I got his card and saw his name really was Sam. But that doesn't mean anything. The card seems legit, but he is still a stranger to me. Long story short, he got inside the room and locked the door behind him. So it was just him and me, trapped inside the room. He tried to have a conversation with me and tried to get me to sit down with him on the bed. But as soon as he tried to get close to me, I just stood up and tried to get to the door, in which point he proceeded to grab my hand and tried to get away from him. And I finally screamed and told him to go away. I don't remember much about what happened next, but the next thing I know, I heard his brother's voice calling for us and asking what happened, and he was banging on the door. Now I was crying hysterically and struggled to open it, while Sam just sat on his bed looking at me, seemingly stunned as if he didn't do anything wrong. I finally managed to get the door open, and at this point I was sobbing and told his brother I wanted to leave now, and that I didn't want to be there anymore. Somehow I convinced his brother to just drive me to my university. Of course, the gate was locked, and the security guard told me that I had to walk to my dorm because he can't let any car inside after midnight, and I just said it was fine and walked the rest of the way. But I didn't care and didn't want his brother to find out where I stayed, for fear that they might come back and search me. I was exhausted, and I remember telling my friends back home about what happened the next day after getting some much-needed rest. And they actually think it was romantic, and I missed a good opportunity to find a boyfriend. And I was like, what the heck? Which part was romantic? The part where he practically dragged me to come with him even though I repeatedly said no? Or the part where he locked me in his room with him? What the actual hell? Oh, and I still had his IC, but I kind of forgot I had it with me until I arrived at my room and kind of just lost it and cried silently and realized I was still holding his ID and cried harder, waking up my roommates. I didn't know them that well, but they kind of helped me, and I told them bits and pieces of what happened to me. But honestly, I just want to sleep and forget about everything that ever happened. For a week, I lived in terror, and I refused to go out of the dorm in fear that Sam and his brother might come back. Sam did text me and call me a few times asking about his ID, and asked me to hang out with him and his brother again as if nothing happened and everything was fine. And then he told me he went to my university looking for me, and I freaked out. I asked my roommates to drop his card with the security guard and told Sam to just pick it up there, but he never came. I blocked his number after that. I ended up dropping out of that university a few weeks later, but for a different reason unrelated to this story. I've moved back with my family in East Malaysia. Now, I don't know if I'm being overly dramatic about what happened that night, and I don't really care if anyone believes me, but it felt good to finally let this off my chest, and I don't really know what would have happened that night if I didn't scream and convince his brother to send me back to my university. But Sam, the supposedly good guy, let's never meet again.
This was when I was actually pretty young, 14. I'd annoyed a wannabe bully from my school by making him look like a bit of an idiot in front of his friends. This guy wasn't big or hard, but liked to think he was. I wasn't big or hard either, but I didn't respond well to people attempting to bully me. That night he came after me with a Stanley knife. I was in a McDonald's near a cinema with a few friends. He was off his nut on cheap vodka, cider, and coke. Thankfully, a friend who was friendly with this lad ran into him on his way to McDonald's and was able to warn me. I ducked into the girls' toilets and stayed there until a friend messaged me that it was safe to come out. This was back when texts cost 20p each, so I'm forever thankful for the financial sacrifice. He was hanging around the area looking for me, so I called the taxi and got out of there ASAP. I ended up having a fight with this lad sober in school, and after that things calmed down a bit. He's now in prison for murder after a drug deal that went wrong.
So, this happened when I was 19 or 20. I'm 31 now. Rarely drink or go out anymore. But last weekend, a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a couple of years asked me out, and we ended up going to a club on the same street where the story takes place and reminded me of it. The legal drinking age in Brazil is 18, so people here start partying pretty early, and let's face it, no one really knows their limits when they start drinking. My friends and I had gone to this club. I honestly can't remember the name right now, but I know it closed down a couple years back. We had a great time, and the sun was coming up as we were leaving. Most clubs here give you a credit card when you walk in, where you either put in the money you plan on spending, or they work as a personal digital tab where the bartenders add up what you're drinking, and you pay for it on the way out. I pay for my stuff and sit outside to wait for my friends, who were taking a long time to get out, probably due to being so drunk. As I'm sitting there, I notice a car across the street. 2 dudes on the front seats, one out of the car trying to make this clearly drunk, out-of-her-mind girl get inside as well. She's mumbling, stumbling, struggling to keep her eyes open, and she's saying, "No, I don't want to go," over and over, shaking her head, clinging onto the car door, as the guy keeps telling her to let go and get inside. That they're just going to a friend's apartment to drink some more. It'll be fun. Come on. I watch, wondering if I should do something, if no one else is seeing this happening. I look at the club's security guard. He looks at me and shrugs, like it's not his responsibility. I look back at the girl, and I'm really uncomfortable, but also scared. My friends are still nowhere to be seen. I'm alone, the security guard is clearly not doing anything, and there's 3 of the guys. What if they decide to try and get me too? The girl says one more time that she doesn't want to go with them, and before I realize what I'm doing, I'm getting to my feet and shouting, "Hey!" The guy stops trying to push the girl into the car for a moment and then looks at me. "She said she doesn't want to go, dude," I say, starting to make my way across the street, even though my hands are shaking and my voice is probably not the most convincing. "She's our friend. She's just drunk and being cranky. It's all good. We're just gonna take her home," he says. He seems a bit nervous and not exactly angry, which makes me feel a bit better, or less scared. "Do you know them?" I asked her, and she just shakes her head no, using the door as support to keep herself on her feet. Creep number 1, the one who was trying to push her into the car, looks at me, then to his friends, who seem frustrated, but start saying, "Come on, man, let's go, just leave it." Creep number 1 now looks a bit ticked, grabs the girl and pushes her towards me before getting into the car, and they all leave. The girl nearly falls onto her face, but I grab her and we walk back to the front of the club, my heart slowly going back to its normal rate. Only then I realized my friends had come out and were watching everything from across the street with confused faces. We all meet random people at clubs at the door walking down the street, so they probably thought I had met someone. I start asking her what happened, if she's alone, where's all her stuff? And she's in an incoherent mess, mumbling about losing track of her friends, her purse. She doesn't even know how she paid her tab to leave. I ask for some help from the security guard. He says he can't leave his spot. He can't do anything. I explain what happened to my friends, and they talk to the hostess about it, who begrudgingly goes and checks the lost and found. Her purse is thankfully there, minus the money she had in her wallet. And we managed to call her parents. I talked to her mom because the girl can't explain anything. And I promised to stay there until the mom comes to get her. 30 minutes later, the mom arrives, and I've never seen someone look so relieved and terrified at the same time. She thanks me and my friends profusely and offers us a ride home. But as we lived in the town next over, she just drives us to the subway station. In the middle of all the craziness, I forgot to exchange numbers with any of them, so I've never heard of that girl or her mom again. But I hope she learned to be more careful with how much she drinks or who she talks to in clubs. Also, shame on her friends for not looking out for her or trying to find her when they realized she was missing. Though maybe they were all just as drunk as she was? Who knows? I know what I did was probably a bit reckless, but I wouldn't be able to just watch that car drive away and live with myself. Please be safe when going out, people. And creeps at nightclubs who try and take advantage of intoxicated people, let's never meet again.
I was working in a retail store in a pretty sketchy area. There was this lady who was obviously a heavy drug user, or at least ex-drug user. She must have been in her 50s to 60s. She was notorious on my block for being crazy. But she'd come to me all the time and told me that she thought I was cute. It was really bizarre because she looked like a crackhead, but she'd act like a teenage girl around me. I tried to be nice to her because she was known for being volatile. Anyway, on Christmas Eve, she packed an entire Christmas dinner, which she told me was all home-cooked Guyanese food, and a cologne set. As she was leaving, she just squats down on the floor and throws her hands up and starts cackling. Yes, cackling which faded to a giggle. Never saw her again. And for those of you wondering, yes, I did eat the food. It was delicious.
In my teens, I had a fair share of encounters with creepy older men. And after my last post here, I figured I'd post another encounter I had. This happened when I was 15, over a decade ago. Boy, I'm starting to feel old. I've told this particular story to friends for years, but I've never posted it online. There were a lot of long stretches of industrial area in the town where I grew up in. Large plazas with big parking lots stuck next to one another, and wide open stretches of road and highway. The majority of my town felt like the area before an airport, flat, gray, and functional. As a depressed teenager, I used to go out after school a lot by myself. First, it was within my neighborhood, but it escalated to me leaving the quaint residential areas to walk an hour or two in any direction. I'd usually make my way home before dark, and I had a trusty flip phone at the time to call my parents if I needed to. Generally, I felt pretty safe walking on the main streets because of how populous they were. There were always plenty of cars on the road, and there were quite a few pedestrians out and about. One early summer evening at about dusk, I was making my way home from one of my walks. It was a route I had taken a lot, and I was about a 40-minute walk from home. I was just passing a parking lot when a car pulled out in front of me. I stopped about 2 feet from the vehicle to let it turn onto the road. But the driver rolled down his window. "Hey, how are you?" he asked me. The man looked to be in his late 40s and greeted me with an unsettling enthusiasm. I wasn't sure how to respond, but since I couldn't pass his car, I hoped he just needed directions or something. I'm okay. How are you?" Before I could even finish my response, he says, "I love your style. Goth girls in boots are one of my fetishes." I am not paraphrasing. Now, as I said, I'd been approached quite a few times by creepy men, but this guy was beyond bold. I had absolutely no idea how to respond. Just as I was going to try to formulate a response, a car pulled up behind him, meaning that he was blocking another car from exiting the parking lot. There's a car behind you trying to get out," I tell him, relieved that I now have a way to get out of the conversation. "I'll meet you in the next parking lot," he exclaims, and as I try to tell him no, that I need to get home, he drives off. In my mind, there was no way he could be serious. I continue walking, but sure enough, he's in the next parking lot. The parking lot he had entered was down a bit of a hill, and he was standing beside his car. As soon as he saw me, he started waving me down. I'd been followed by cars before, and I was genuinely afraid of the idea of making a man angry and being stalked to my home. I assessed the situation. He was parked about 10 feet from a dive bar, and there were about 15 men outside on the patio, which meant that they could see me and would be in earshot if I screamed. I weighed the options between going down to meet him versus potentially being followed home, and made the stupid decision to walk down the slight incline. I honestly don't know why I didn't just pretend to be on the phone or call my mom. I don't remember what he said when I approached, but I kept my distance from him and his car, so I wouldn't be easy to kidnap. He walked around to his trunk, and I felt myself tense up and take a step back. He then pulls out a pair of women's boots and approaches me slightly to show them to me. They were lace-up, about mid-calf, maybe size 9. "Nice, aren't they?" he asks me. Yeah, I respond hesitantly. They were not nice, but my brain was on autopilot. "Want to try 'em on for me?" he asks, grinning. I'm absolutely stunned, more than scared. I'm completely baffled that this is actually happening. "I think I'm a little young for you," I managed to stammer out. "No, you're like what, 20? "I'm 15. All the blood leaves his face, and he finally realizes that he's made a mistake. He quickly puts the boots back in his trunk and says something to the effect of, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You're just so hot." I shouldn't be saying that. You're 15. I kinda laugh him off and exit gracefully. He drives out of there well above the speed limit. I'm relieved, but left absolutely bewildered and creeped out. Why was he carrying around a pair of women's boots? How many women did he approach? What just happened? What would have happened if I was over 18? Why did his brain think what he just did was okay? Even if I had been old enough. I still can't wrap my head around everything that had happened. And if he thought that it would actually work, even if I was an adult. I'm in my late 20s now, which means that if he approached me today, he would probably be more insistent. So creepy boots guy, let's never meet again. Hello, my name is Gothic Rose. I just want to say it's been an honor to be a part of this collab with Mortis Media. It was truly an honor. If you're looking for another narration channel with an array of different genres of horror to listen to, consider subscribing to my channel and joining my coven. And join us every Monday and Friday for new stories that you can sink your fangs into.